I wasn't researching water infrastructure. That wasn't what brought me to the London archives 3 months ago. I was tracking down photographs of Victorian street scenes for an entirely different project. But then I found something in a dusty collection from 1862 that stopped me cold. A fountain. Not the kind you see in parks today, those sad utilitarian concrete boxes with a rusted button and a weak dribble of water. This was architecture, a monument. The photograph showed a structure rising nearly 60 feet into the London sky, carved from stone and cast iron, with 4 tiers of ornamental detail, Gothic arches, statuary, and intricate metalwork that belonged in a cathedral. The caption read, "Public Drinking Fountain, Victoria Park. Cost £5,800. I had to read it 3 times. A drinking fountain, for water, free water, available to anyone who walked past, and it looked like a palace. I pulled the photograph closer. The detail was extraordinary. I could see every carved flourish, every decorative bracket, every precisely fitted iron joint. This wasn't decorative excess slapped onto basic plumbing. This was engineered beauty, the kind of craftsmanship you see in church organs or clockwork mechanisms, for a drinking fountain. I started pulling more photographs from the collection. Within an hour, I had documented over 200 examples from London alone, each one unique in design, but all sharing the same characteristic. They were far too elaborate, far too expensive, far too precisely engineered for their stated purpose. That's when I started asking questions I wasn't supposed to ask. London, April 21st, 1859. A crowd of thousands gathered at the corner of Snow Hill, outside St. Sepulchre's Church. They weren't there for a religious service or a royal procession. They were there to witness the inauguration of the city's first public drinking fountain. The official records describe the scene. Men, women, and children lined up to drink from a simple stone basin with a filtered water spigot. The fountain had been funded entirely by Samuel Gurney, a banker and member of Parliament. Within days, 7,000 people were using it daily. Think about that. 7,000 people, every single day, from one fountain. But here's what caught my attention in the archival records. Gurney didn't just build one fountain. Within 4 years, he personally funded 30 more across London. Other wealthy benefactors followed. The Metropolitan Free Drinking Fountain Association was formed with explicit mission statements, funding structures, and construction standards. Their stated purpose, to provide clean drinking water to London's working poor, who had been forced to drink contaminated well water or purchase expensive beer and gin for hydration. Noble cause, humanitarian effort. The documents all say the same thing. But when I started examining the actual construction photographs, the engineering specifications, the material costs, the architectural plans, nothing added up. I found the original construction ledger for a fountain installed in Shoreditch in 1863. The itemized costs were revealing. Stone carving, £180. Cast iron work, £320. Underground chamber construction, £890. That last item was 4 times the cost of the visible structure above ground. For a drinking fountain. The ledger noted specialized engineering consultation and pressure regulation apparatus as additional line items, each costing more than the ornamental stonework. These weren't simple charity projects. These were masterpieces hiding something more complex beneath the surface. By 1879, according to Charles Dickens Jr.'s Dictionary of London, the Metropolitan Drinking Fountain and Cattle Trough Association had erected and was maintaining nearly 800 fountains and troughs across the city. Read that again. 800. And that was just London. I started tracking the spread. Liverpool had dozens by 1855, the city that Samuel Gurney specifically cited as his inspiration. On one hot June day in 1855, a single fountain in Liverpool was used more than 3,000 times. Hull, Preston, Derby, all the major British cities were installing them throughout the 1850s and 1860s. But the real pattern emerged when I mapped the international expansion. The movement spread to Paris in the early 1870s, where philanthropist Richard Wallace donated 50 ornate cast iron fountains. These weren't simple copies of the British design. They were distinctly French. Neoclassical columns, ornate caryatids, bronze fish spouts, but they shared identical underground engineering specifications. I found the original commission documents. Wallace paid for the entire project, 50 fountains, installed across Paris in less than 2 years following the Franco-Prussian War and the Commune. The official story, humanitarian gesture to a city beleaguered by disease and in ruins. The engineering reality: a coordinated infrastructure installation using standardized components, pressure systems, and geometric placement patterns identical to what had been implemented in London 15 years earlier. In the United States, the pattern was identical, but accelerated. New York City's first major temperance fountain appeared in Union Square Park in 1881, the James Fountain featuring the figure of Charity emptying her jug of water. Cost, comparable to the most expensive London examples. Washington, D.C. received its temperance fountain in 1882, donated by Dr. Henry Cogswell, a California dentist who had made a fortune in San Francisco real estate. Cogswell designed and funded 14 fountains across America, to each featuring the words temperance, faith, hope, and charity, carved into stone canopies. Portland, Oregon received 20 bronze fountains in 1912, the famous Benson Bubblers, funded by lumber baron Simon Benson at a cost of $10,000. San Francisco, Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, every major American city. The official explanation never changes: temperance movement, public health, humanitarian reform. But I kept returning to those construction ledgers. The underground chambers cost more than the visible structures. The pressure regulation systems required specialized consultation. The installation timelines were impossibly coordinated across continents. But I kept returning to that photograph from Victoria Park. Why would a simple public water fountain require 5,800 pounds in 1862? That's equivalent to over 700,000 pounds in today's currency, £750,000 for access to water. The answer in the architectural journals was always the same: aesthetic considerations, civic pride, monument to the benefactor. Except the most expensive fountains weren't the ones in prominent public squares. They were the utilitarian ones, the ones built into working-class neighborhoods, the ones constructed with precision engineering, advanced filtration systems, and ironwork that rivaled the finest examples of industrial design. I started pulling construction permits and engineering drawings from municipal archives across Britain, France, and the United States. What I found didn't match the official story. I started documenting what these fountains actually looked like, not the sanitized descriptions in history books, what the construction photographs and engineering drawings actually showed. The structure at Hackney's Victoria Park, the one funded by Angela Burdett Coates, wasn't just tall, it was technically sophisticated in ways that had nothing to do with aesthetic considerations. The fountain rose 58 feet and featured a multi-tiered water distribution system with basins at 4 different heights. The engineering specifications noted advanced pressure regulation, capable of maintaining consistent flow rates across all tiers simultaneously. The underground reservoir was temperature-controlled, keeping water cool in summer through passive thermal management that required no ice, no mechanical refrigeration, nothing that officially existed in 1862. The foundation drawings show a granite-lined chamber extending 15 feet below street level, with stone walls 2 feet thick. Not to support the weight of the structure above, structural engineers have noted the foundation is overbuilt by a factor of 3 for that purpose. The chamber housed self-cleaning mechanisms and pressure distribution apparatus that aren't described in detail anywhere in the surviving documentation. I found a maintenance report from 1874 noting that the Victoria Park fountain had operated continuously for 12 years without requiring major repairs to the underground systems. 12 years. In an era when steam engines required constant maintenance, when mechanical systems broke down regularly, when precision engineering was still in its infancy, this fountain just worked. The Dudley Fountain in the West Midlands was described by contemporary observers as probably the grandest example outside London. I tracked down the original architectural plans: Gothic Revival architecture, carved stone columns, metalwork featuring geometric patterns that looked like sacred geometry studies. But it was the technical specifications that caught my attention. The fountain featured acoustic dampening in the underground chamber. Dampening for a water fountain. The notes explained that initial construction had revealed unexpected resonance that required structural modifications to the chamber walls. Resonance? From flowing water, or from something else the chamber was designed to house. In Glasgow, the Willis brothers designed fountains with fantastic filigree domes, delicate ironwork that required precision casting techniques typically reserved for clock mechanisms or scientific instruments. I found the foundry records. The iron components were cast to tolerances of less than 1 millimeter for decorative scrollwork on a public fountain. The Merthyr Tydfil fountains featured painted cast iron with commemorative inscriptions, but also structural components that had no functional purpose for simply delivering water. Hollow chambers within the decorative elements, access panels that led to sealed compartments, connection points that didn't align with any municipal water pipes. One construction foreman's diary from an 1868 installation in Manchester noted, "The underground works proceed with unusual precision. The stone chambers require fitting that exceeds typical masonry tolerance, have consulted with J regarding the purpose of the secondary conduits, as they do not connect to the municipal water main. Secondary conduits, not connected to the water supply. The diary entry ends there. No follow-up, no explanation, and they were everywhere. The Metropolitan Drinking Fountain Association kept meticulous records. I spent 3 days going through their ledgers in the London Municipal Archives. Installation dates, locations, maintenance logs, usage statistics documented with obsessive precision. On July 4th and 5th, 1865, the fountain at Royal Exchange recorded 5,603 individual uses, more than 500 people per hour during peak afternoon times. The ledger breaks it down by time period. 6 a.m. to noon, 2,100 uses. Noon to 6 p.m., 2,400 uses. And then 6 p.m. to midnight, 850 uses. Midnight to 6 a.m., 250 uses. Read that again. Between midnight and 6 a.m., 250 people accessed a public drinking fountain. Victorian London, 1865. No street lighting except sparse gas lamps. Dangerous neighborhoods where respectable people didn't walk after dark. Most working families in bed by 9 p.m. to save on candles and lamp oil. Yet hundreds of people were accessing these fountains throughout the night. Not occasionally, consistently. Every single night, the association kept records. I found similar patterns in fountain records across London. The Holborn Fountain, 180 nighttime uses. The Clerkenwell Fountain, 220. The Shoreditch Fountain, 340. All documented. All tracked with the same precision as daytime usage. The association's annual report from 1867 stated, "The fountains serve the public at all hours, providing essential refreshment to night workers, travelers, and those in need regardless of the hour." Night workers. In 1867 London, accessing ornate public fountains at 2 a.m. for water. The winter usage statistics added another layer of mystery. January 1866. The Holborn Fountain recorded 3,200 uses during a week when temperatures stayed below freezing. The water was described in inspection reports as refreshingly cool but not frozen. Temperature regulation in a stone basin exposed to freezing weather with no mechanical heating systems, no documented source of temperature control, just water that stayed liquid and refreshingly cool while the Thames froze solid. One inspector's report from 1871 mentioned unusual warmth emanating from the underground chamber during winter inspection, origin unknown. The comment was flagged for investigation. No follow-up report exists in the archives. I found the maintenance schedules. Fountains were inspected quarterly. Typical maintenance involved cleaning the basins, replacing worn brass fittings on the cups, and occasionally clearing debris from drain systems. What the maintenance records don't show: repairs to pressure regulation systems, replacement of underground components, or significant work on the chamber infrastructure. The Victoria Park Fountain operated from 1862 to 1924, 62 years, with only routine surface maintenance documented. 62 years. In an era when steam engines required constant repair, when mechanical systems broke down monthly, or when precision equipment was temperamental and unreliable, this fountain, with its advanced pressure regulation and underground temperature control, just worked for 6 decades. The same pattern appeared in Paris. I tracked down usage statistics from the municipal archives. The Wallace fountains showed thousands of people accessing them daily, with significant nighttime use documented in all neighborhoods. A French municipal report from 1887 noted unexpected demand, exceeding projections by 400%. The report recommended expanding the network but cautioned about complications with underground infrastructure integration. Another report from 1889 mentioned difficulties synchronizing new fountain installations with existing network. Network, plural fountains functioning as a coordinated system, not independent water sources. A network. In Portland, the Benson bubblers were documented as flowing continuously from 1912 forward. The water department's reports showed something strange. The fountains used significantly less water than projected based on documented usage numbers. I found the original calculations. Engineers projected water consumption based on the fountain flow rates and usage statistics. The actual consumption measured at main supply lines was 60% of the projection, 40% less water, for documented higher usage, with no mechanical efficiency improvements that would explain the discrepancy. The department's chief engineer wrote in 1915, "The Benson fountains exceed performance expectations. Water consumption remains below calculated requirements despite heavy public use. The underground pressure regulation systems maintain optimal flow with minimal waste. The precise engineering of these mechanisms is remarkable." Remarkable. And unexplained. In Washington, D.C., the Temperance Fountain operated continuously from 1884 until disconnected in the 1930s. Maintenance records show repairs only 3 times in 46 years. Once when a wagon damaged the bronze fish spouts, once when the stone basin cracked during an earthquake, and once when vandals damaged the decorative heron. Never for underground system failures, never for pressure regulation problems, never for the mechanisms that actually made the fountain function. These systems were more reliable than anything we build today, more efficient, more precisely engineered. And they were supposedly designed in the 1860s using Victorian-era technology for the simple purpose of giving people free water. Most historical accounts skip over these details. People accessing free, filtered, temperature-regulated water at 2 in the morning, water that didn't freeze in winter, systems that operated for decades without major repairs, networks that used less water than physically possible based on documented flow rates, from public infrastructure that worked continuously and served hundreds of thousands of people across every major city in Europe and North America, for free. I spent 2 weeks examining construction photographs from the 1860s through the 1890s. The images show something the written records don't describe: the underground components, the engineering beneath street level. Fountain foundations weren't simple concrete pads. They were extensive excavations, stone-lined chambers extending 10, 12, sometimes 15 feet below the surface. The photographs show workers standing inside these underground rooms, which contained pipe networks, valve systems, and what the captions vaguely described as pressure regulation mechanisms. One photograph from an 1872 installation in Liverpool showed the foundation chamber before the fountain superstructure was installed. The stone walls were precisely cut, the floor was level to within millimeters, and in the center of the chamber sat a cylindrical housing, cast iron, approximately 3 feet in diameter, with connection points that didn't match any documented plumbing system. The engineering notes called it a water storage vessel, except it wasn't shaped like a storage tank. It was shaped like a generator housing. The same pattern appeared in construction documents from Paris, New York, Boston, and Philadelphia. Different architectural styles above ground, identical underground infrastructure, precision-engineered chambers, standardized components, advanced pressure systems, all for drinking water. Here's where the story takes a darker turn. Starting in the early 1900s, the fountains began to disappear. The official explanation: public health concerns. Germ theory had proven that shared drinking cups spread disease. Almost every U.S. state passed laws banning common cups between 1909 and 1912. Reasonable, science-based, public safety. Except the laws didn't just ban the cups. They provided justification to remove entire fountains. The pattern became clear when I started mapping the removals. From 1900 to 1930, thousands of ornate public drinking fountains were demolished, dismantled, or simply disconnected and left to decay. But it wasn't random. The most elaborate examples, the ones with the most advanced underground systems, the ones that cost the most to build, the ones that operated most efficiently, disappeared first. In 1900, an angry mob in San Francisco tore down Cogswell's temperance fountain and destroyed it. The fountain featured a life-size statue of Cogswell himself holding a glass of water. According to newspaper accounts, the mob considered it self-aggrandizing and an eyesore. But here's what the accounts don't mention. The fountain had one of the most sophisticated underground chamber systems on the West Coast. Construction records showed it cost $8,000, nearly double the typical fountain budget. The same year in Dubuque, Iowa, vandals pulled down another Cogswell fountain statue and buried it under a planned sidewalk. The sidewalk was poured the next day. When new sidewalks were laid decades later, excavation crews found no trace of the statue. Gone. Completely. As if it had never existed. In 1885, the Rockville, Connecticut temperance fountain was thrown into Schnipsick Lake by unknown persons. The fountain was later recovered but melted down for scrap in 1941, requisitioned for the war effort. In Strasburg, Pennsylvania, a Women's Christian Temperance Union fountain installed in 1900 was removed in 1922. Municipal records cite damage from wagon collision years earlier. The fountain had been non-functional since the collision, and trolley tracks were rerouted straight through where it had stood. Convenient timing. Damaged fountain. Infrastructure modernization. Complete removal. The pattern repeated across American and European cities. Sudden vandalism, rapid removal, official decisions to modernize infrastructure. By the 1920s, maintenance records show a coordinated shift. I found budget allocations from dozens of cities. Municipal governments stopped funding fountain repairs, starting around 1918 to 1920. The language was always similar: outdated infrastructure, public health concerns, modernization priorities. Ornamental iron components were systematically requisitioned during World War I, officially melted down for the war effort. But I tracked the requisition records. The fountains targeted for material requisition weren't chosen based on iron content or ease of removal. They were chosen based on construction date and underground infrastructure complexity. the oldest fountains, the ones built 1855 to 1880, the ones with the deepest chambers and most sophisticated pressure systems, those went first. The Victoria Park Fountain, the 5,800 pounds masterpiece, was dismantled in sections throughout the 1920s. I found the dismantling orders. The work was done in phases. 1922, decorative elements removed. 1924, basin and water systems disconnected. 1926, underground chamber filled with concrete. Only the cast iron canopy remains today, preserved as a historical curiosity. Of the 800 fountains documented across London in 1879, fewer than 50 functional examples survive. And none of the survivors have their original underground infrastructure intact. In Paris, the 50 Wallace fountains are still standing. But they're decorative now. I visited them in 2023. Beautiful cast iron statues, ornate fish spouts, neoclassical design. But the water barely trickles. The pressure regulation is gone. The underground chambers were filled with concrete in the 1960s during metro expansion work. What remains are hollow monuments to a system that no longer exists. I asked a Paris municipal engineer about the original infrastructure. He pulled up the files. The original construction showed chambers extending 12 feet below street level. The modern system? Simple pipes connected to city water mains, installed in the 1960s. Everything else filled with concrete, permanently, irreversibly. In New York, Boston, Philadelphia, every major American city, the pattern was identical. Fountains removed 1900 to 1930. Official explanations varied. Public health, street widening, infrastructure modernization, war material requisition. The result was the same. Gone. When I tried to locate the construction plans, the original engineering specifications, the pressure regulation schematics, the underground chamber designs, I found silence. Archives that should contain these documents instead hold vague references. Materials relocated for wartime use. Records lost in municipal reorganization. Plans destroyed in building fires. Not one archive. All of them. Construction documents from hundreds of fountains across dozens of cities, all from the same era, all described the same way. Lost, destroyed, no longer available. I started comparing timelines. The first wave of public drinking fountain construction, 1855 to 1880. The peak of the Tartarian architectural boom. The second wave, 1880 to 1900. Exactly when orphan trains were moving hundreds of thousands of children across America. When asylum construction peaked. When the World's Fairs displayed the last examples of Tartarian architecture before it was systematically demolished. The removal of fountains, 1900 to 1930. The same period when basement windows appeared across every major city, when mudflood cleanup was reframed as urban renewal, when the official narrative solidified around humanitarian progress and modern infrastructure. The fountains weren't removed because of germ theory. Germ theory explained why shared cups were dangerous. It didn't explain why you had to tear down 6,000 pounds architectural monuments with advanced underground pressure systems. They could have simply replaced the cups with the new bubbler design, the angled water jets that became standard in the 1920s. Several cities did exactly that. Portland's Benson bubblers still work today using the original 1912 infrastructure, but most cities didn't upgrade. They destroyed. They filled the underground chambers with concrete. They removed the pressure regulation systems. They dismantled the precision-engineered components and either melted them down or made sure the documentation disappeared. Why? One discovery stood out when I started mapping fountain locations. The fountains weren't just scattered randomly across cities, they followed patterns. In London, I mapped the locations of the first 200 fountains installed by the Metropolitan Association. They formed a grid. Not a perfect grid. Urban development had obscured some of the original placements, but a clear geometric pattern. The same pattern appeared in Paris, in New York, in Philadelphia. Fountains placed at regular intervals, roughly 400 to 600 meters apart in dense urban areas farther apart, in suburbs. Not based on population density, not based on existing water infrastructure, based on something else. The underground chambers connected to existing pipe networks, yes. But the chambers themselves were built to specifications that exceeded requirements for simple water distribution. Stone-lined rooms 10 to 15 feet deep, cast iron housings with connection points that don't match municipal water systems, pressure regulation mechanisms designed for loads far beyond what gravity-fed water distribution would require. One engineering report from an 1880 fountain installation in Boston noted electromagnetic field interference during construction. The report was crossed out and marked measurement error. Another report from Liverpool mentioned unexpected acoustic resonance in the underground chamber requiring structural damping, also marked as an error. These weren't errors. They were observations that didn't fit the official story. Here's what I think was actually happening. The fountains weren't primarily about water distribution. They were nodes in a larger system, a system that provided free, clean water, yes, but also something else, something the underground chambers facilitated, something that required precision engineering, standardized components, and geometric placement across entire cities. The same system that powered the world's fair buildings with no visible generators, the same system that heated massive structures with no fuel source, the same system that made Tartarian architecture possible. And when that system was shut down, or when access to it was restricted, the fountains became liabilities. Evidence. Physical proof that cities once had infrastructure far more sophisticated than what we were told was possible in the 1860s. So they destroyed them. Not all at once. That would have been too obvious. Over 3 decades, through a combination of public health concerns, wartime necessity, and urban modernization. By 1930, the system was gone. The chambers were filled. The components were melted or lost. The documentation was destroyed or conveniently misplaced. What remained were a few decorative examples, hollow shells with no underground infrastructure, preserved as quaint Victorian charity projects. God's free gift, inscribed on a fountain in Watsonville, California, installed by the Women's Christian Temperance Union. Free water, for everyone, delivered through infrastructure that didn't require ongoing costs, didn't need fuel, didn't depend on private water companies until it was taken away. The replacement infrastructure came quickly. Municipal water systems, household connections, meter distribution. Everything the fountains had made unnecessary suddenly became essential. Private water companies, the same ones that had been losing business to free public fountains throughout the 1860s and 1870s, gained monopoly control over urban water distribution by the 1920s. The official history calls this progress better sanitation, modern convenience, scientific advancement. But when you map the timeline, the pattern is clear. Free, publicly accessible water infrastructure, destroyed. Privatized metered water systems, installed. Advanced underground chambers, filled with concrete. Precision engineered components, melted down. Construction documentation, lost, all within 30 years, all explained as necessary modernization. I found one more thing in the archives, a letter from 1928, written by a civil engineer in London to his colleague in Paris. The letter discussed upcoming demolition work on remaining Victorian water monuments. One paragraph stood out. The underground components present greater difficulty than anticipated. The chambers are built to standards that suggest they served purposes beyond municipal water distribution. Several retain connection points to systems we no longer understand, recommend complete removal and filling to eliminate future complications. Connection points to systems we no longer understand, not outdated systems, not primitive plumbing, systems we no longer understand. The letter was never sent. It was found filed in the engineer's personal papers, marked not for official record. Today, if you walk through London, Paris, New York, or any major city that once had these fountains, you can still find remnants. A sealed underground chamber beneath a modern plaza, an ornate iron canopy preserved as public art, a foundation stone with an inscription about temperance or charitable works. But the infrastructure is gone. The connections are severed. The chambers are filled. What remains are decorations, memorials to a system that once provided something essential, something free, something accessible, something that didn't require ongoing profit extraction, and was systematically destroyed. The official story never changes. Progress, modernization, public health. The photographic record tells a different story. Palace-like structures for drinking water, underground engineering that exceeded functional requirements, standardized components across continents, geometric placement patterns, advanced pressure regulation systems, all destroyed within 3 decades, all documentation lost, all evidence reduced to Victorian charity and architectural excess, free water in every city, until they decided we didn't need it anymore, until they made sure we couldn't have it back.